Abby, Rangers fan in Glasgow, good morning to you. I agree with you on this, Abby. Great show as always, guys. What I have noticed recently is Danny calls Simon Si. Can we please put an end to this immediately? It's just not on. Simon Jordan is a legend of the airwaves. He deserves full respect. It's got to be Simon Jordan, or even better, Lord Jordan. Thank you kindly, Abby, in Glasgow. I mean, we've noticed this, Danny. Sorry, we come to you with you've got a mouthful of possibly a whole digestive biscuit. And you do call him Si. You don't call me Je.
Maybe I've misinterpreted our friendship and closeness.
Or maybe underestimated just...
Yeah,
where you are
underestimate,
with them. Do you object to Si?
No, it's a term of endearment. I don't mind it from people I like, and I like Danny. I would never refer to myself as Si. I've always had this problem with people that call themselves Steve rather than Stephen, or Phil rather than Philip. So I wouldn't walk around calling myself Si.
Right.
But I don't mind it because I'm fond of Danny.
Did you point that out in the interview process to Bruce? I would rather call you Stephen Bruce than Steve.
No, I called him many things before that.
There you go. It's in the mail this morning. Mike Keegan, who I met in a London restaurant on Monday, but that's another story. There's no story, really. I don't know why I'm mentioning it. Mike Keegan, very good journalist in the mail. 10 top clubs set to ditch New Deal. So
10 now? I thought it was only 6.
Steady yourself. I'll tell you more. Mike reports that a growing number of Premier League clubs are considering ditching football's New Deal and taking legal action should a government regulator try to force them to pay. In fact, he reports in his article that at the meeting the other day, clubs pushing back on giving clubs further down the pyramid any money whatsoever. The clubs pushing back are Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham, Liverpool, West Ham, Villa, Wolves, Forest, Palace and Bournemouth. The clubs failed to agree a new deal at Monday's shareholder meeting, with the Premier League releasing a statement reaffirming their commitment to reaching a deal. That's good of them. We'll get there eventually, but we haven't got there quite yet. Charlton's co-owner, who got very favourable reception on this show the other day, not just in here but by all the listeners out there, Charlie Methven, gave his message to the so-called rebel clubs.
I would say just ask them to grow up and remember that these clubs, the clubs that they run, were very recently Football League club members. And the fact that in the game of musical chairs, they're currently sat in the seats where they're currently sat, doesn't mean that at some point their clubs won't be back in the Football League and in a position where an equitable distribution of English football's total revenues would actually be an extremely welcome thing to them.
That was very well said by Charlie. He got a lot of backing for that. So pushing back, Arsenal, well, they're not going to drop down anytime soon, nor Chelsea. Tottenham, Liverpool, West Ham, Villa, Wolves, Nottingham Forest, Crystal Palace and Bournemouth. And Charlie says to the lot of them, grow up. Yeah. He's not wrong, is he?
Well, it depends what you mean by grow up. You see, you're being asked to give something to somebody that you don't have to at this moment in time because there's a threat that somebody else is going to make you do it. That's the leverage, right? That's the leverage. The Football League has run itself poorly for a variety of reasons over a significant period of time. And it's allowed the Premier League to disappear into the ether, do what it wants, and now it wants to bring it back into check. And it can't because it's got no leverage. It's got a moment of leverage, which is the independent regulator. So everyone's playing their hand the way they want to. And having sat in Football League meetings and listened to voices like Charlie Methven that think that by shouting out dissent, and once upon a time I was one of them, because it had incompetent leadership. The Football League was run by incompetence. It's not run by incompetence now. It's run by capable operators that are most likely to deliver an outcome. Now, if you're going to shout at the Premier League, grow up, right, then what you're doing is you're making a moral argument. The real grow up is this is business. There's no obligation, really. I think there is a responsibility for the football world to distribute properly, but that ship has sailed. That genie has left the bottle, right? That happened a long time ago. Now there's an opportunity with the threat of the independent regulator to maximise a one-off existential opportunity to create a different landscape. Now, what you don't need is dissenting, self-motivated, further down the pyramid voices suggesting that there's a better way to do it than allowing Parry to finish the negotiation. They don't want to give any money. Would you? Do you want to give any money? Do you want to give any money to Five Live?
You've just... No, hang on. You've just said they have a responsibility.
No, I
to
don't.
give money.
No,
Yes, you did.
I think
you said they have a responsibility to give money
within the confines of a football.
Never mind all that.
Hang on, let me explain the point rather than let you make it just a soundbite. Right? The ultimate equation is you've got a pyramid that threw up the Premier League. Right? in real
Sorry,
terms,
Si.
in real terms, because of collective responsibility, because of collective bargaining, there should be some form of responsibility about how the money's distributed. But that ship has sailed. That went.
Says who?
The fact that you don't have any obligation to do it. So now you're talking about the commercial reality. Put aside sentimentality, put aside socialistic views, and look at the business world of how people hold things together. You are not going to give...
What do you mean socialistic
Because
views?
it's not about distribution of wealth. It's about what you have to do, not what you think you should do.
It's doing the right thing.
By whom?
Obviously. The pyramid.
Don't be stupid.
They have a responsibility.
Don't be silly.
The haves and the have-nots.
No, that's
have you never heard of that?
Oh, okay then. So we can. How do we extrapolate that up to that? Everybody that hasn't got something should be given by somebody that does. That's
but
ridiculous.
You just said they've got a responsibility
No, I
to do
said
it.
that once upon a time, if things were constructed properly, there would be a responsibility.
What's that meant to mean?
But it hasn't been constructed
They've still
properly.
got a responsibility
No, they don't.
to do it.
They have an economic windfall that they have benefited primarily because of their own achievements.
Simon, they've been told by the government they've got to come to a deal.
No, they haven't. They haven't been told
They
that.
have.
They've
I'm
been,
afraid
no,
they have.
No, they haven't. They've been advised by the government. The government has no jurisdiction, no legislation over English football. They've been advised by the government, if you do not take care of this yourself, we're going to put an independent regulator in there. We're going to give them legislative powers, and they're going to do it. That's all they've been told. Now, what they're doing is they're going, well, how do we do this, right? What do we do, and how do we negotiate? And how do we make sure that we play our hand? Because we don't want to give them bugger all. And neither would you if you were in their shoes.
Why
And
don't
this
they say that in
ridiculous
their
moral
statement, then?
argument that someone should remember where they came from. No, nobody wants to be in the EFL. No club wants to be in the EFL. They all want to be in the Premier League.
Of course.
Right? So they don't care about what happens in the EFL. The only time you care about what's happening in the EFL is when you're in it. Right? And now what Charlie's arguing for is remember where you came from. Well, wonderful, great, fantastic.
But he's right.
But they don't choose to. So they don't choose to. So if they don't choose to, you can't say, well, you should.
Forest were there for 23 years. And they seem to have forgotten where they were.
Well, aren't they one of the clubs that potentially are voting for it?
No, they're one of the ones that vote. They're pushing back in it.
Okay, well, if
that's
they're
the very point. That's Charlie's point.
But his point is based upon,
and they might well be back in it if they're not careful.
His point is based upon what, in an ideal world, should happen. Are League One clubs, just out of curiosity, or League Two clubs now responsible for the commercial broadcast rights of the Premier League? I would argue that it's difficult to make that case. I would argue when the Premier League was formulated 30 years ago that it was very relevant, and all the deals that went after that needed to have been stronger and better and commercially more adept. But that ship has sailed. So now what you've got is you've got to rely on goodwill, which there ain't any of.
There's none.
Right?
Of course,
and why
I get
should
that.
there be? It's not a charity. And you've also got to
the problem is these so-called rebel clubs, of which your former club is one.
They're not rebel clubs.
Well, they're saying we're not interested. We'll be pushing back in that. We won't be helping out the ones below us.
But they don't feel they have to.
But because of. Yeah, but you've already said they've got a responsibility to do it. Because of the EPL's voting rules requiring a 13-7 majority, they can act virtually as a wrecking ball here. And that's exactly what they're doing.
No, they're not a wrecking ball. They've got to be made to do it. Right? Now, they're not going to do it voluntarily. They're not going to give money to other people voluntarily. They're going to be made to do it.
Do you agree with that?
I think it's commercial reality. We can all live in an idealistic world, or we can live in the real world, right? And the real world is people don't tend to give people things if they don't have to, unless there's something in return for it. Now, the Premier League will dress it up and come up with a load of old cobblers. We're giving 1.5 billion over 3 years. No, you're not. 70% of that is parachute payments to member clubs from your own league, right? So you're not giving that to the pyramid. You're giving it to clubs that have been relegated as a result of being in a Premier League membership. So that's cobblers for a start. You're also not paying your 5% levy down to the grassroots football that you should pay, and you've never paid that. So that's also not being done. So no one's suggesting it's right, but the problem is, who's going to make them do it? Who gave up the responsibility of doing it? The FA abdicated responsibility. The EFL have been incompetent, and now they've got a chance.
Well, the government will make them do it.
No, the government will not make them do it. The independent regulator
All this
will
lot
give
are
them an
doing
opportunity.
Is accelerating the arrival of the regulator.
It's done. The independent regulator's coming in.
Yeah, but sooner than maybe many people thought.
The independent regulator's coming in 25.
Because they've dragged their feet as they continue to do.
The independent regulator was always coming in 25. The only thing they were ever going to do is limit the scope, right? So the only thing they're worried about, really, is the economic distribution. So if you're the Premier League, sitting here in the Premier League, put aside your silly moral argument and move with the commercial reality, right? What would you do? Would you give the EFL money now, or would you wait until you really had to?
You'd wait, wouldn't you?
Well, of course you bloody would.
What happened? What's the role of
Doesn't
the
make it right, by the way.
What's the
but it's
role?
commercial reality.
That's key.
What's the role of the independent regulator if the or the Premier League and the EFL do happen to come to an agreement and a deal?
Not a lot, really, because the real intrinsic
They're not going
benefit,
to, Danny.
the real intrinsic they will do. Categorically, they will do, because they're not going to leave themselves as a hostage to fortune to wake up for some dozy political appointment as an independent regulator, giving them far more than they possibly can get from an independent
So Mike
negotiation.
Keegan tells us in the Mail, top flight sides met on Monday to vote on the so-called New Deal.
Yeah.
Effectively, a £167 million a year rescue package
not
over
enough.
5 years.
It's not enough.
Ahead of the imminent arrival of the new football ombudsman. But the ballot didn't take place after half the clubs made it clear it's not worth doing so. Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham, Liverpool, West Ham, Villa, Wolves, Forest, Palace and Bournemouth. If you were still at Palace, would you have Palace in that category?
Yeah. I would say
Give them nothing.
I would say no, we've got to give them something because we know what's coming. We know the independent regulator is going to adjudicate. Do we want the independent regulator to make this decision? No, we don't. How hard do we want to make them work for this deal? As hard as we possibly can. So, given the fact that every single pound I give to an EFL club is one out of my pocket, yes, you can make the argument, oh, don't forget where you've come from. Well, I choose to. I choose to forget where I've come from because that's my commercial decision. So you worry about yourself in League One, and I'll worry about myself in the Premier League. And my concern is I've got a £100 million wage bill right now, and what I need to do is manage myself in the meantime. So what I'll do is I won't be giving you anything until I have to. You'll have to wrestle it out of my cold, sticky, dead palm.
So what you're saying is the inevitability of the deal. That's
what I'd be saying, specifically to Charlton, by the way.
Shocking.
So you're saying inevitably they will make the deal. So this latest episode, to simplify terms, is just part of the process.
He's just saying, let them sweat.
They will have you argue that Rick Parry's already done a deal. It's already been agreed, and now the Premier League are reneging. And there might be some sophistication in that argument. I would wager you that it's not quite as cut and dried as that. And having been there, I'm telling you, having been there with these clowns in the EFL, they will start shouting and screaming about what they think they're
entitled. Trevor's a pal of yours.
No, not Birchie and Rick Parry.
Birchie.
Right? Because okay. I tell you what, I sat there with incompetence. I watched EFL chairman and EFL chief executives that couldn't run a bath, let alone a proper football league. But you haven't got that now. And there needed to be dissenting voices when there was Karen Brady in there, Theo Pafitas, Charlie Koppel, David Bernstein, myself, that sat up in front of people going, you guys are imbeciles, get out.
Isn't Rick trying to unpick something he set up himself when he was...
No, he's trying to unpick... He's rowing back on the parachute payments. What he's saying is the original concept of the parachute payment has gotten out of hand. Once upon a time, it was a safety net. Now it's become a revenue stream that's far greater than it should be, and it's killing other clubs in the EFL.
But we need to readdress it.
But he'll make the argument himself because I've challenged him on it that actually I never intended it to go as far as it did. Okay. Right? Slippery slopes. The point is now you've got one opportunity, and you don't need the runts of the litter further down the pyramid going, we've got something to say. You need to be behind the EFL leadership. Let them put the Premier League to the sword by being prepared to walk them to the court steps, metaphorically, i.e. the independent regulator.
So is Jim putting himself in with the runts of the litter?
Very much so. I'm proud of it. The runts of the litter. I can't believe it. Can you imagine? I mean, you know, one or two in that group of 10 may become the runt of a litter as well.
But that's an argument they're not interested in. You can't make them be interested in something that you think, oh, you better be frightened.
Why did the Premier League bother the other day putting this out? Premier League clubs today agreed to prioritise the swift development and implementation of a new league-wide financial system.
On their terms.
Clubs also reaffirmed their commitment to securing a sustainably funded financial agreement with the EFL.
On their terms.
That's a lot of old cobblers,
on their
isn't it?
terms.
Yeah.
What they didn't say was, we're going to do precisely what you want, when we want, how you want.
Obviously, they're not.
Of course they're not. So what you're asking them to do is to fall in line with the principles of an agreement that may need to be finessed, or maybe there'll be opportunities to get worse or better deals.
Right.
I think that the bottom line is that they should hold their nerve, and they should challenge the Premier League in the court of public opinion at the same time as allow commercial negotiators like Parry and Birch to get the deal done as best they can, because they'll never get an opportunity to get this money again. Never.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.